If you are not familiar with ALLDATA, I think most of you are, we have a suite of products that are all based on OEM information directly from the manufacturers. So we provide repair procedures, we provide a management system, we provide a hotline, tech assist, we also provide training garage, and we also provide diagnostic products. So that's what ALLDATA does, and we'll talk about, not necessarily specifically about what ALLDATA does, but just leveraging data, leveraging technology in your service departments. So again, we're not losing money. I'm going to introduce Doug Turner, and he's the Director of Service Operations at Byrider. He can give a little bit of background with his expertise.
Hey, thanks, George. Good morning, everyone. Doug Turner with Byrider, as George mentioned. So I started with Byrider back in 1999. So I've got a few years of experience at Byrider. Since I've been at Byrider, I've managed the buying team, the remarketing team, and now I head up our company store service departments. So this is round 2 for me with company store service departments. I'd done that prior from 99 to 04. That was what I was first hired in for. So I've been in the automotive career since right out of college, but it's been a very exciting business model for us, and we're excited to be a part of this class and looking forward to everyone's participation and input today. So.
Great, thanks. Hey, so before we get going, I'd like to find out just a little bit about who's in the room, who's participating. We've got a lot of folks from ALLDATA, AutoZone, and a few folks from Byrider. But in terms of the dealers that we have out there, all of you are buy here, pay here dealers, I assume, or independent in some way. But buy here, pay here means you're in some way, shape, or form writing your own paper and doing the buy here, pay here piece, correct? Okay, great. And I had an opportunity to say hello to several of you when you came in. Everybody running a service department on site? Okay. Anybody not who's considering running a service department? Okay, good deal. Based on my introductions with each of you, a lot of experience in the room, so hopefully that'll facilitate some good conversation as we go along here.
Now, Chase, it was Chase, right? Did you say you do not have a service department? Do not.
We're giving 4 days at the turn of the month.
Okay. What are some of your challenges when subletting that car out or that customer out to a different repair facility?
Good mechanics.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think you'll probably see that as a common theme in this meeting and other meetings is hiring, retaining, and training of technicians or mechanics.
Deal. Hey, so let's talk about this. 10,000 buy here, pay here dealers across the U.S. What is the single most important challenge or problem that you all are facing today? I think we heard one of those, technicians, right? What are some other challenges that you all are facing in your service business, your service departments?
What about quality inventory? Is that an issue? Always an issue. And I would assume everybody's seen a shift, and you probably started to see a shift happen back in 08, 09, when you could go to an auction and you'd see a lot of new car dealer trades or front row inventory. But as lending is loosened up and a lot of the lenders are buying a lot deeper, that used car has a higher demand. So everybody's keeping their cars for their front row, and you don't see as good of a quality car at the auction now as you used to 5 to 10 years ago.
And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about various inventory sources, whether you're going to the auction, whether you're using wholesalers, whether you're taking in on trade, and some of those sort of things as we talk about that quality inventory and utilizing tools that help ensure that you're finding the best quality inventory that you can, okay? But number one concern of buy here, pay here dealers today is increased cost of doing business, and that covers, a wide array of different concerns and challenges that you have in your service department, and we'll talk about some of those. But as we just mentioned, the other 2 top or close to the top items: lack of quality inventory and lack of wholesale inventory. So we'll talk about those, and we'll get into those as we go along. So And then there's a couple other things that trickle off there as part of those concerns that buy here, pay here dealers have today. All right, so let's get into running a buy here service department and talking about the fact that it's getting increasingly complex. Part of that complexity is just vehicles, right? Vehicles are getting more and more complex as we go along, and we'll talk about that as we get through. And the fact that technology, as that complexity goes up, right, whether or not you've got the tools and the ability to work on those vehicles, address your vehicle needs based on that complexity. So I've put up 5 profit prevention topics here that we'll dig into, and we'll look at each of these. I'm calling them the profit prevention departments. Okay, we talked a little bit about technicians, so we'll talk about technician skill level. We'll get into that a little bit. We'll talk about best practices, how to find good technicians, how to retain good technicians, and we'll explore that. I think throughout the week that's probably been a hot topic. It usually is. We'll talk about service department comebacks, what the experience is there, how to avoid those comebacks, and again, some of the technology that's being used out there. Many of you are using it in your own facilities today, but also what potentially could be used to help eliminate those service department comebacks. Vehicle evaluation at the time of acquisition. Again, we'll get into what those sources of inventory look like, right? Auction, wholesale, trade-in, and some tools that can help you better evaluate that vehicle and make a decision on, hey, whether or not that's going to be the right piece of inventory for your lot. We'll talk about supplier relationships, right? And those suppliers could be part suppliers. They could be your data providers, right? And just making sure that you've got good, strong relationships in those areas, because you need to lean on those relationships, right? If you don't have good, strong vendor relationships and that you can rely on and lean on, right, a small problem can certainly turn into a bigger problem and cost more money. And then lastly, we'll talk about advanced driver assistance systems. As again, we talk about the advancing technology of the vehicles and inventory that is beginning to show up on your lots and certainly through the auction lanes, identifying what some of the pitfalls or challenges may be with each of those. Okay? So let's jump into technical skill level. And you know the statistics. I think everybody here in the room has this challenge, and we'll talk about it. 50,000 automotive tech shortage between what the demand is and what the supply is in terms of technicians. And I think, and we'll talk about it, technology can reduce this impact, right? Whether it be through training or whether it be through retention, depending on how you have your service department set up, right, and the tools that you're using can certainly help bridge that gap with finding and keeping good technicians. So we talk a little bit about that. So let's just, before I go further, let's talk about that experience in the room just a little bit and what that challenge looks like for several of you. Obviously, everybody's going to raise their hand when I ask the question, hey, are you challenged with finding good technicians, right? So tell me a little bit about that. What are the challenges? Is it attracting technicians? Is it that those technicians are going to franchise dealers? What's that dynamic look like for a lot of you?
They can't pass the drug test.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a lot that are taking counter offers to stay where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We're having to offer big sign-on bonuses. We send them after we make them an offer and they accept. We send them a gift basket to try to make sure they actually show up on their first day.
Now, Brian, what are some of the incentives you offer when you think about sign-on bonuses, and how does that work?
We're doing 5,000 in a few markets. We've got a franchisee in Wisconsin that's done 10,000. And that's just to get in the door with some of these guys.
Do they have to stay there a certain period of time, or how's that paid out?
Yeah, we're doing ours over 12 months. Some do 90 days, but we've done ours to pay out over a year.
Got it.
Any other ideas about attracting technicians or thoughts? How do you interview a technician? Does anybody know how to interview a technician? I'm not a technician. I could probably be ASE certified master in less than 12 months, but I could tell you wouldn't want to hire me. But I'd probably do a good job in the interview process, right? So we're working on ways in the industry to identify how to interview technicians better, where it's more objective, because they'll tell you they can fix everything. They'll tell you they have a $50,000 toolbox. They'll tell you everything you want to hear, but actually when you get them in a bay and turn a wrench, it's a little bit of a different story, right? So finding them and finding the right spot for them on your team is very important, because they'll all interview extremely well because they're going to tell you what you want to hear. But if you don't know what questions to ask, that can create a lot of challenges once you get somebody on the team, obviously.
Who's lost a technician in the last 12 months? Why? Well, hired away at a higher rate. Okay. Yep. And so outside of a signing bonus, when you're trying to attract that technician, what are some things that you all are doing to keep them? Outside of wages, perhaps. Are there some other things that you're doing to make that shop a quality environment, or what are some of those things? Yeah.
In our case, we found more success making the work environment so dang fun and exciting that they don't want to go anywhere else. And that's
Yep.
pretty good. Some people are stupid, but
So what makes it fun and exciting at your shop?
a lively work environment, a lot of collegial back and forth, open transparency amongst the people, not a lot of competition. So we're trying to open up the bays and make it lighter and fluffier, not in a girly sort of way, but just a
Yeah.
We understand that.
How many?
a lot of times these service departments tend to be kind of like dungeons.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if you make it a happier place, people.
Now, how does everybody pay their technicians? Do you pay an hourly rate or flat rate versus book time type of stuff, or?
It's hard to pay them on flag time because there's so many other issues that they have to deal with. You know, you put them on one job,
Yep.
something else comes along.
Yeah, we're not upselling it to a consumer in a lot of cases. Yeah.
You can get like maybe one good guy that you can do flag time, just keep them busy. But
Sure.
others, for us, we find it hard to pay flag time. That's why you have to pay these crazy wages since you're not paying flag time.
Yep.
So a lot of information now written just about that retention piece, right? And what service departments, what dealers are doing for that retention. I read an article recently where, and I think it was a 4x4 shop, right? They specialized in 4x4. The owner, they souped up a 4x4 and had it there for the technicians on the weekends. If you wanted to go out 4x4 or something like that, right? So all kinds of interesting things and perks that different service departments are doing to make that environment fun, exciting, rewarding. What about the tools inside the shop? I would imagine that if the shop is not outfitted with the most current tools or technology, right, there could be a level of frustration there where the other guy down the street has got those toys or tools, if you want to call them, and that might be more attractive. What's the experience there? That'd be pretty accurate, just in terms of some potential for lost for that technician? Okay. Well, let's
Well,
talk.
well, think about it. Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
I found that sometimes you have to drag it out of them. They won't tell you, maybe they'll just deal with it. You have to overtly ask them, hey, is there anything here that would make your job a little more efficient, a little easier? And they may tell you there's a problem with current equipment that you can get fixed, but they just kind of learn to live with it every day. So what I found is you have to actually go ask them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you think about when they have a large toolbox or a large amount of tools, whether it's diagnostic scanners or just hand tools, that they have a lot of debt associated with those tools, and that is very, very challenging. So what we've taken an initiative on is we're going into the vocational schools, in the high schools and post-high school, to start talking to the students to attract them to come to our business. And it makes it a lot easier to train them and to get them on the path that you want. And we're actually starting them out with their own toolbox. And if you stay with us for a period of time, you own the rights to that toolbox. And we can help them identify that you don't need to go into a lot of debt. We're going to help that transition. And trust me, we've spoken to 2 high schools within the past 30 days. Juniors are getting offer letters from new car dealerships going into their senior year. So I think that identifies that these dealers are grabbing in them even before they're out of high school. But then you have to find bells and whistles that make it more enjoyable and identifiable to come work for you. And a lot of it can be tools. If they don't raise their hand or if you don't get it out of them and you don't buy it for the shop, they invest that money themselves, which hence they accumulate a lot of debt.
We offer scholarships at the local technical schools.
Oh, nice. That's great. That's great.
I don't know the answer to this question. If you lose a technician, and again, it varies in terms of the size of dealership you are, the amount of volume that you do, the number of technicians. But when you do lose a technician, what's it cost? What's that cost look like for your business in terms of your ability to recondition, your ability to address warranty concerns, right? Keeping cars out on the road running. What's that do? If you've got one technician, obviously that's a whole different dynamic. If you've got 3 or 4 technicians and one goes away, right? That workload gets shifted to 2 or 3 of them. So that missing technician, right? That can be just a cost that it's hard to measure, but there's no question it's an impact on the business, correct? Right? That way you're not turning inventory maybe as quickly as you could. You're not getting cars through that service department as quickly as you might. And so everything kind of slows down at that point. And again, it's kind of hard to put on paper, but perhaps the cost of good equipment, perhaps the cost of good technology, perhaps that good working environment is going to cost a hell of a lot less than what it costs you to have that technician leave or have to go through that rehiring process, right? So let's talk a little bit about just the technical side of things, some things that could potentially help in terms of either acquisition or retention. If your service department has good training, that can certainly be an attractive retention piece and an acquisition piece. So what does that look like? There's a lot of online training courses. To make it fun and exciting, it could be a reward system. If you get past certain levels of training that's out there, right, does that give a bump in pay? Some of those sort of things. I think many of you may be implementing some of those techniques, but there's a lot of opportunity out there from an online training course perspective, okay? We talked about correct tools and, obviously keeping that tooling up to date, working from a technical side of things, maybe some of the latest and greatest scan tool opportunities, diagnostic opportunities. We talked about the increasing complexity of vehicles. making sure that, again, that level of frustration from a technician standpoint stays at a minimum because you're providing those types of diagnostic tools that helps them be more effective in what they're trying to do and the quality of vehicle that they're trying to put out. Okay? And then the other piece is a technician hotline. Okay? So we have one at ALLDATA. There are other solutions out there, but certainly providing those technicians a resource, right, beyond what their own capabilities are and beyond what some of the capabilities may be in the shop at a pretty low cost, right? So a lot of the tech lines are full of ASE certified technicians, master technicians, okay? And that's certainly less expensive too than hiring a tech, right? It also facilitates a training process as well. So if you have that tech that comes in and you went through the interviewing process and he says, hey, yeah, I can fix anything, right? We've had that. And then he gets stumped, right? You've got the opportunity to provide that sales aid or that training aid so that when they do run into that challenging car or that challenging problem, they learn through that process too. The biggest challenge there is getting them to admit, hey, I don't know how to do that, right? So cultivating that environment, facilitating that educational piece, it's not a bad thing to reach out to somebody for help, right? It can also facilitate that learning experience as well. I see some heads nod in that world, right? Technicians don't like to call people for help, do they?
Or admit they're wrong. Yeah. Well, I think too a lot of those tools and information that you have up there also helps with technician retention. In addition, it also helps to fixing or mitigating comebacks after the car's been repaired the first time. Think about how disruptive that can be to your entire team or your entire service department when that car comes back in for something that should have been fixed right the first time. And then at the end of the day, that creates bad customer experience. So I think by utilizing resources helps with retention and mitigates comebacks as well.
I put Rescue Lens just as a technology piece up there. Rescue Lens is what we brand this product, but call it FaceTime for technicians, whatever you want to call it. There's technology out there that facilitates that conversation when a technician does need help, right? So they call a tech hotline. They say, hey, here's my problem, right? And the certified master technician on the other side is saying, hey, look for this, do this. And because they're not standing right there at the car, that interaction can be difficult, right? New technology allows them to take their phone, actually show them exactly what they're looking at on the vehicle, and then have that dialogue so that they can actually physically see what the issue may be. And the master tech on the other side can certainly give them better directions on, hey, go address this issue or go diagnose this, okay? All right, let's talk a little bit about comebacks. Fix it right the first time. Correct diagnosis and correct OEM procedures. And I think we've got a case study here on an Acura that Doug's going to pass out, an inoperative, I think, window module. And so we'll talk a little bit about that case study. I'll give him a chance to get this passed out. Thanks, Michael. So technician followed OEM testing procedures to properly test the window monitor circuit and found that the window motor needed to be replaced. The technician installed a new motor, but it didn't work. Happens all the time, right? What went wrong? What should the tech do now? He missed the final step, right, which was the reset procedures. And had they had the OEM information that provided visibility to that reset procedure, right, they might have been able to avoid that. So I think reinforcing that the OEM procedures and having that information within your service departments is obviously key. The challenge that I think you run into, and you guys can confirm or deny, is that when you have that technician, and speed is important, right? You got to get those vehicles through. You want to make sure that that machine is still running, and you're selling cars and you're getting them up on the front line. You're addressing warranties, so speed is an issue. But I think what happens is we get out of balance between speed and quality, okay? And if you don't have a good mix between that speed and that quality piece, it's going to cost money, right? And if you're not providing the true OEM procedures and you're using tools that are just simply, hey, it pointed me in the right direction, but didn't actually get me all the way to fixed, and all the way to fixed for a long time so that it doesn't come back, then I think that's a profit sucker, right? That's one of those profit prevention pieces that you'll run into as you go along the way. So any other experiences out there like this one where you've got a continual stream of comebacks because technician just missed something? Go ahead.
With newer technology, I think sometimes when you have people that have been in the industry for a long time, wrenching, kind of there's that disconnect almost.
Sure.
You know, what is the newer procedure? How do you do now? I mean, they know how to, anybody can R&R, but to actually go a step further and see what is the new technology asking for, what is it requiring now, that's where sometimes there's a disconnect.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. I think it goes back to, again, that technician and training piece, which is, hey, I know how to do this. I've been working on 05 through 10 model years, right? And now all of a sudden I'm starting to see 12, 13, 14 show up on the lot. And the technology changed. It changed rapidly. And the procedures may be different than what they were before. And we'll talk about a couple other examples as we go through here where that's evident. I think you're probably running into a lot of that today. Certainly if your model is getting newer vehicles on your lot, and again, I think you all probably have different models in terms of the inventory that you're trying to go get and put on the lot and those sort of things. But that technology, as we've gone up model years, is changing pretty rapidly.
Well, in addition to that, too, I think when you think about pre-sale reconditioning, think about the technicians that we typically hire. They come from where? They come from retail. What happens in retail? They want to upsell everything, right? So if they misdiag that part or that issue, they just go back to the customer and say, hey, I'm sorry it wasn't this, but it was this. We need to add this on. Well, in our business model, that can get very, very expensive. So identifying that and fixing it right the first time is very important. But as we're going through these 3 case studies that we have, these are good questions that you can ask a candidate that you're interviewing and see what their reply is, right? So don't forget about these case studies, and these are good interview questions as well.
All right, let's talk about inventory. Where's everybody getting their inventory? Auction? Predominantly? Okay. Or
Any online? Anybody buying online? A little bit?
Okay.
Trade-ins for my new car store.
Sure.
Got it. The online piece probably presents some challenges depending on what that source looks like. I guess most of that online is still coming from the auction at some level.
Yep.
Right. So, Doug, you and I spoke a little bit about what BuyRider's mix is between auction and wholesale. If you want to,
Yeah. So our typical mix is usually about 50% auction, 50% wholesaler, and we've struck up relationships with wholesalers where they have buyback policies, or we have buyback policies that if we buy a bad car, they'll buy it back from us and give us our money back. Well, if you've ever bought a bad car at an auction and you take it back to the auction, what happens? it's not worth quite as much as what you paid. I'm not sure how that works out, but you pay $5,000 for that thing and it does a quarter at the auction, and you're like, what the hell just happened? Sorry. But nonetheless, so we work with wholesalers very, very closely. And if we bring that car into our service department and it needs more repairs than what we want to put into it or should put into it, we will ask them for a help check or a reimbursement check to offset some of those expenses. Now, typically, you're never going to steal a car from a wholesaler. You might occasionally get a good price at an auction, but a wholesaler is going to charge you market price all day long. So we buy a little bit of both, but we've obviously seen our online penetration rates go up as well. We're buying more online. Little bit more risk associated with that online buy, but the rewards can be a lot better too, because you don't have travel and a lot of other expenses associated with it.
What tools is everybody using to help in that evaluation process, whether it be at the auction or whether it be in a wholesale environment or a trade environment? What are some of the kind of quick hit, I'll call them, tools that you guys are using from either a diagnosis standpoint or a checking of codes through the OBD2 ports? What's everybody doing out there?
That's kind of just a small scanner you plug in and go, real quick, just bare bones.
Yep.
Kind of get a general idea of what's going on.
Okay.
See if all the code is cleared.
Yep.
Common, they can clear them all off. Tell about their head, not their problem.
Yeah.
So the auction experience has changed quite a bit. They used to have a lot of test tracks. Now they don't have test tracks. So I don't know if you've been lately, but you can't even really test drive cars anymore at the auction. They do that for insurance reasons, but they also do that for other reasons, so they can sell post-sale inspections and some other ancillary products to the group. But we utilize post-sale inspection. We utilize Deal Shield some to kind of protect that investment based on risk. But more importantly, we look at who we're buying the car from. The auction's not selling us a car. A seller is selling us a car. And we track every seller very, very closely, because if you sell me a bad car and you don't resolve it, I'm not going to do business with you. But if you sell me a bad car and you resolve it and fix it and we call it a day, we'll continue to do business. So just as importantly, to make sure that we're buying the right car, we have a very firm and strict relationship with our vendors that if this happens and you don't resolve it, we're just not going to do business.
So I think the key there is have a system, right? Whether you're the buyer that's going to the sale, or whether you're paying somebody to go do that, or you have a buyer, right? Have that system in place, whether it's a diagnostic device, but then does that diagnostic device give the whole picture, right? Are you getting repair procedures that correlate to that to say, hey, this is either something that my technicians can address pretty quickly, pretty inexpensively, or is this something that I need to stay away from, right? This is going to be a problem car. This is going to be a car that I'm going to spend way more money in terms of reconditioning than certainly I would normally do. And just putting those tools in place and having those tools for whoever's doing that evaluation is certainly the key.
That's only looking at half the problem. It's not just you're going to spend that much more money fixing the car. You're likely to get that car back with an unhappy customer who's not going to pay for it. Yep. Some cars you just can't get it right. You're just wasting your time.
Right. Yeah, and that's certainly more relevant, and I forgot about the audience that I'm talking to, right? That's certainly more relevant in the buy here, pay here space, because it is so daggone important to keep that car on the road, keep that car running, because if it's running, you're getting paid, right? So, all right. We talked a little bit about some case studies. Let's take a look at another one. We're going to look at a Toyota Camry hybrid that was bought at the auction. So as Doug's passing this out too, as mobile technology has changed, it provides certainly a low-cost opportunity to provide that tool and that system to you or whoever's at the auction, right? An opportunity to do that evaluation and understand what those repair procedures may be, because you've got all that information on a mobile device, right? So a lot of opportunity for tools and systems to put in place to, again, equip yourselves, equip that buyer with the most up-to-date OEM information that is available in a mobile environment. So let's take a look at this 2012 Toyota Camry Hybrid. Purchasing agent finds a 12 Camry Hybrid. Agent connects his tablet to the vehicle onboard computer and finds 2 diagnostic trouble codes that have to do with the hybrid battery, right? TSB's, technical service bulletins, address the codes. He's got the information. The hybrid battery cooling fan is clogged and needs to be cleaned. The battery also must be replaced. Should he buy the car or not? Right? I think a lot of folks would just steer clear of that, right, with those codes that pop up. Maybe not. Using OEM data on his tablet, again, that mobile device, agent pulls the OEM parts and labor costs. $3,500 for a new battery, and the labor's 2.5 hours. The technical service bulletin also mentions that the battery is under warranty for 96 months or 100,000 miles. Car's only 4 years with 63,000 miles. Battery's under warranty. It's not going to cost what he thought it might have cost, right? If he didn't have that information, passes on the vehicle, has that information, turns out to be a good buy and certainly a good profit piece or a good retail inventory piece to sell. So again, just investing in that mobile technology certainly allows. Yeah, go ahead.
We use all that and have for years. It's a very effective tool for service department. I've come across technical service bulletins that are helpful as well. But I've also come across some here recently that say that there's additional campaigns for additional coverages, like this case today. And we call a new car dealer and say, hey, is this one covered under this? Most recently, in 2012 June, I had bought from one of the online auctions. It had extended coverage on the motor. We called the Nissan dealer, like, no, it doesn't. So there was a clear error of some sort. How often do you see that? In my case, it's just frustrating.
So there was a disconnect between the information you were getting from AllData.
And the tech service bulletin was posted.
Okay.
It wasn't the first time it's happened.
Right.
First thing we won't see that, I was just call the new car dealer and
Yeah.
say, okay, check this. And they say, no, there's not that coverage.
If you have those specific examples, let us know. We get those technical service bulletins, and that's where it's odd that there's a disconnect there. We get those technical service bulletins not from the community, right? We get those technical service bulletins directly from the manufacturer. And in fact, that's really AllData's entire platform. There's not a mix of anything from the community or technicians or reauthoring of that information. It's all coming directly from the manufacturers. So those would be instances where we would want to go back to the manufacturer and say, hey, why is there a disconnect between what you're providing us to publish in our product and what the dealers are telling the consumer?
Have you seen any instances where that may have happened, where the manufacturer did step up and were you able to help get that issue covered?
I've not seen that specifically, but certainly more than happy to kind of jump into the discussion and have that discussion with the OEM. So if you want to reach out to me, we can take a look at that specific one and do some research on it, for sure. Yeah.
I was just going to say, sometimes it seems like there's a disconnect
Yeah, and I'd probably just encourage you, and I can speak on our behalf. I would just encourage you to reach out to us, right? If you've got questions about the content, right, we have a library service that'll respond to you within about a half an hour. If you need to speak with a technician, we can facilitate that conversation as well, for all makes and models, right? So we just simply want to be a resource that helps you be as profitable as you possibly can and fix cars right? So I'm not necessarily going to, and Doug can probably speak with his experience with the dealers. I'm probably not going to be the person that mitigates any issues between a franchise dealer and their service department. But in terms of committing to you that we have the right OEM content and some resources that help you find solutions, absolutely we can do that.
And I have seen that from dealer to dealer. You call dealer A, and they say, no, it's not covered. You call dealer B, and yes, it's covered. So I wouldn't just stop at one person. I would keep trying other dealerships. In addition to that, build a great relationship, no different than you would with an auction or anybody else. Build a great relationship with all your dealers because they'll give you a lot more stuff than maybe another dealership would.
All right, so we're talking a little bit about technology. That was a good segue into supplier relationships. Certainly this isn't new information, but just really a reinforcement about who have you established relationships with in your business? Because based on those relationships, they can certainly be money savers, right? If I have a part that is defective, does my supplier allow me to go back to them and not only replace that part, but also reimburse me for the time and effort to redo that job again, right? If I don't have that level of relationship, that's going to cost me money down the road, okay? Does my supplier have a good, effective web ordering site, right? That is accurate with the amount of parts that I'm buying and the amount of reconditioning that I'm doing. Because if I don't get the right part, right, again, I got to send it back. It takes time. Certainly in a warranty situation, when I want to put somebody back on the road, that's a disruption to your customer relationship. So being able to have that strong reliance on that supplier from that side and ensuring that they're providing you with the best data is helpful, right? Any examples of that where you've had an opportunity to leverage those types of relationships and how it's impacted the profitability of your businesses? Okay. All right. I'm sure it happens, right? When you've got when you don't have somebody to lean on, or when you do have somebody to lean on from that perspective.
Well, we primarily use AutoZone, and I know there's some AutoZone team members in the audience today, but the nice thing about that, in addition to what you've already said, is just the nationwide coverage. So when we have a customer out of our market, we can get warranty coverage or labor claim coverage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that takes us to our third and final case study, and we'll talk a little bit about complexity of vehicles and what I think you all are starting to encounter with assisted driving systems. And I found this case study to be pretty interesting. So as we're passing those out, outside of this specific example, anything that your service departments are encountering today relative to ADAS?
Yeah, nothing. We don't know how to diagnose them. That's the scary thing.
All right. So let's go through this. Driver reported to service writer that a recently purchased Toyota Prius automatically begins applying brakes when approaching the bridge. Okay? So could have happened to really anybody in this room. Had a Prius, got it from auction, sold it to a customer. Customer starts driving down the road, encounters a bridge, car stops. Right? What happened? Well, the technician found that the radar unit behind the vehicle's grill was tipped up 2 degrees. Okay? So they didn't do a scan of the vehicle, perhaps, at the shop. They didn't identify that there could have been a calibration issue with the vehicle. And so it was part of a previous repair that might have occurred. Could have been a very minor repair, minor bumper repair, but one that wasn't necessarily addressed properly. Had they gone through the testing procedures and identified that through the OEM reset procedures, could have avoided a customer issue, right? Or even a safety issue for that matter. And I know that everybody in this room, too, is extremely sensitive to safety issues as well. So the technician used OEM instructions to perform the system calibration and resolve the issue. But I think it might be a little bit extreme, but probably can be applied to what you all are doing today. You're putting customers in cars. You're committing to them that car is safe and reliable. And in order to do so, got to make sure that you have the right data, the right information, and the right OEM procedures to make that commitment to your customers, right?
And I think a lot of times when you think about the shift or the transition in cars and automobiles to this ADAS stuff and how that's going to be identifiable and how you fix it, typically when you buy a car, you know if it's had paint work, you know if it's had body damage. I think that's the first indicator that you probably need to check deeper and deeper into the car. But a lot of times you can only identify items like this on a long test drive or getting that car inspected very, very thoroughly. So our business model is shifting more and more towards this stuff every single day, and we have to get more prepared for it because it's going to create or could potentially create issues.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure. Any questions about ADAS or any other questions? Yeah, I don't know where and what the specific region of the country was or anything like that, but yeah, this was an actual case.
So whoever it was that had a technician that could see a 2-degree difference in a radar unit, I would really want to pay them a lot more.
In the auctions are running into this as well because they're taking these cars that are coming out of fleet, out of lease, off rental, and the auctions need to tell this story to the buyer, right? Because if you buy that car at an auction, you get it back home and it's got an issue like this, you're going to push back on the auction, who's going to push back on the seller. So the auctions are really challenged right now with trying to figure out how do they get their condition report writers or their technicians to identify this stuff and or repair it. And they're having, Frank Hackett's here from NAAA, and they're having that challenge right now because it takes a special person with a special tool to be able to identify issues like that before the car is sold at the auction or before it's retailed to a consumer.
Yeah, and I would probably say this is a little bit on the extreme side, but I think it goes back to, hey, what are the procedures or what are the things that you've set up in terms of process at your shop and the tools that you're providing your technicians with to make sure that every car that comes into the shop gets a scan with a history report, right, on what codes might have been reset or what codes might have pre-existed before the car gets to your lot. And if you've got those good procedures as cars get to the lot and go through that reconditioning process, right, you may have an opportunity to identify stuff like this. Might have missed this one. It's pretty obscure. But putting that good procedural process together is certainly important for every service department that's out there, right? Okay, we'll at that point, we'll leave it open for questions or any other discussions. I know it was early, and I don't know who had late nights or not, but we certainly appreciate the conversation, appreciate you coming in, appreciate the opportunity to have an opportunity to talk to this group. Any questions? All right. Again, thank you very much. Did you have a question, Debbie? No? Okay. Have a great rest of the show. I can say on behalf of AutoZone and AllData, and certainly on the behalf of BuyRider, we're extremely appreciative of all of the dealers and our opportunity to support in any way we can. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to any of us. We want to be an asset, certainly, to your businesses, and help certainly in that pursuit of profitability. Okay?
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much.